Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. Biden lands in the UK and addresses U.S. troops ahead of the G7 summit and a meeting with Putin. What does Biden say the U.S. needs to do for its troops, and how does that match the budget he proposed? A new report from the Department of Homeland Security shows 7 children were reunited with their families over the past month. But the report also shows more than 2,000 children do not have confirmed records of reunification. Virginia parents bring a Bill of Rights to Loudoun County Public Schools at the heart of the critical race theory controversy. El Salvador is now accepting Bitcoin as official legal tender. Will this trend catch on in other countries? We give you some of the different perspectives on the issue of cryptocurrency. And new data on CCP virus immunity. A study says people who recover from the virus are likely to be free from reinfection for at least 10 months. President Biden is off on his first trip overseas since taking office. He arrived in Britain today as part of his 8-day trip, which includes the G7 summit and a meeting with Russia's president. NTD's Kevin Hogan brings us more.
Biden addressed U.S. troops at Britain's Royal Air Force Base Mildenhall. He thanked them for their service and the sacrifices they have made.
Less than 1% of Americans make the choice that you make, that you made. But the rest of us, the other 99% of us, we owe you. We owe you big.
Biden recounted his visits to Afghanistan and Iraq and spoke about the country's responsibility to military personnel.
That as a nation, we have many obligations, but we only have one truly sacred obligation. Only one. And that's to properly prepare and equip the women and men we send into harm's way, and to care for you and your families both while you're deployed and when you come home.
Biden's first budget proposal favored spending on non-military related items over increasing the defense budget. Specifically, the budget requested $753 billion for defense, a 1.7% increase, and $769 billion for non-defense programs, a 16% increase. The increase in military spending may not keep up with inflation, and Senator McConnell warned Biden that a flat military budget would prevent the U.S. from modernizing its military to compete with China. Biden stopped at the base in Suffolk ahead of the G7 summit this weekend, which will be in the idyllic village of Carbis Bay, England. 4 topics are expected to dominate the meeting: vaccine diplomacy, trade, climate change, and rebuilding infrastructure in underdeveloped countries. After the G7 summit, Biden will travel to Geneva on June 16th to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. It's an opportunity for Biden to address ransomware attacks coming out of Russia and Moscow's aggression toward Ukraine. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
A bipartisan group of senators is negotiating on immigration reform. They're looking at 3 bills to be put into one large bill that could potentially gain enough support on both sides of the aisle to pass the House and Senate. This comes as the Department of Homeland Security just announced they reunited 7 children with their families over the past month. But the report also shows a couple of thousand children do not have confirmed records of reunification. NTD's Melina Weiskup has more on that.
The administration's new task force identified nearly 4,000 children who were separated from their families since 2017, as former President Trump was implementing a new zero-tolerance policy to deter migrants from illegally entering the U.S. About half of those 4,000 children were already reunited under past court orders. Since the Biden administration launched the new task force, 7 families have been reunited. But there are 2,127 children who do not have a confirmed record of reunification, according to the DHS's latest report. But the administration didn't offer any more details about why there are no records for these thousands of children awaiting reunification. And policy on immigration reform is still a huge topic of discussion here on Capitol Hill. Today, a group of bipartisan senators was set to meet to continue their negotiation talks on immigration reform. This bipartisan group is looking at 3 bills. They want to push these all into one bill that can gain enough Republican support to actually pass in the Senate. So in an evenly divided Senate, these negotiation talks are key in order to get some form of immigration reform bill onto Biden's desk. The bipartisan group is led by Democrat Senator Dick Durbin. The first two bills they're looking at aim to grant citizenship to Dreamers and migrant farm workers. These two bills already passed the House, but need to be negotiated for them to win some Republican votes in the Senate. The third bill they're looking at was introduced by Democrat Senator Kyrsten Sinema and Republican Senator John Cornyn. Their proposal aims to deal with the surge at the border right now by creating more processing centers at the southern border. And it would also require the DHS to inform border cities before releasing immigrants into their communities. This bipartisan group will need to continue negotiation talks to find common ground between Republicans and Democrats to see how they can come together to quell the chaos at the border and possibly change U.S. immigration laws. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
And the Customs and Border Protection Agency just released a report. They found that in May, more than 180,000 people tried to illegally enter the U.S. from the southern border. They say single adult males make up the majority of these illegal entry attempts. And Vice President Kamala Harris has just wrapped up her first trip abroad since taking office, and her marks are still coming in. Let's go to NTD's Steve Lance in Washington, D.C. to find out the latest.
Vice President Kamala Harris just returned from her first foreign trip abroad since holding office, and she is receiving criticism on her performance from both sides of the aisle. CNN reported that White House insiders were perplexed by her performance. One major issue that still looms large is the fact that she has not yet visited the southern border since being tasked by the president to lead the effort in solving the border crisis. With mounting pressure from both sides to visit the border, here is what the vice president had to say to Lester Holt.
Let me just quickly put a button.
Okay.
Do you have any plans to visit the border?
I'm here in Guatemala today. At some point, we are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe.
Holt did go on to remind the vice president that this is not something that only Republicans are calling for. Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar from Texas has been sounding the alarm bells on the southern border for months, asking Harris to visit so that she can see the situation for herself. We asked Robert Law, Director of Regulatory Affairs and Policy at the Center for Immigration Studies, why he thinks Harris still has not made a trip to the border.
You go to places where there's a problem. Well, there's clearly a problem at the southern border, unless you don't believe it's a problem. And it seems like, the Biden-Harris administration is comfortable with what's going on at the border. They just don't like the optics, that are being shown.
Although Harris told migrants planning on making their way through the U.S.-Mexico border not to come, Law says her policies don't match her words.
And what the Biden-Harris administration has done is they've discontinued building a physical barrier along the border. They've ended the Remain in Mexico policy, and they're refusing to deport illegal aliens that are currently in the country. All of those messages say, come here now, we will reunite you, we are compassionate. Those are the buzzwords that the cartels and the coyotes are using to market the very dangerous journey north.
With the vice president coming off of a very shaky trip on her first trip abroad, it sets the stakes even higher for President Biden, who is taking off on his first trip abroad today since taking office. He is set to meet with multiple world leaders, including the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin. Steve Lance, NTD News, Washington, D.C.
Parents are petitioning to replace a Virginia school board for focusing heavily on race-based theories. They're now taking the James Madison approach, proposing a Bill of Rights. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
Tuesday's public school board meeting in Loudoun County wasn't short of speakers.
LCPS needs much less activism and a lot more factivism.
And the county school's focus on equity and race-heavy theories drew a lot of criticism from parents and teachers.
Students, you are on the front lines of these indoctrination camps. Challenge the staff when you're presented with a ludicrous statement, and do not allow anybody to tell you that you cannot accomplish anything because of your skin color or to hate yourself because of your skin color.
Speakers even proposed a Bill of Rights, part of which would require schools to make their teaching material public online. In an emailed statement, LCPS told us they're not teaching their students critical race theory. Ian Pryor has kids in LCPS and is leading a campaign to recall several board members.
What we've always said is that their entire way of teaching, their entire way of training teachers is through this lens of critical race theory, which of course is going to drip into the classroom with how teachers teach our children.
For expressing his religious convictions.
LCPS teacher Monica Gill has said that she and her colleagues had to watch this video upon starting their equity training. A team of black runners loses a race to a white man described as privileged and wealthy. LCPS says they want to give students an inclusive, safe, and caring environment. Now, some parents say they're on board with what the schools are doing.
I fully support the equity work that LCPS is doing.
Stop projecting your fear on our children. This isn't about bathrooms or white discrimination. Hate speech is not free. We have kids without food, clothing, shelter. We have LGBT kids who are actually afraid to go to school. We have students of color who have experienced so many micro and macro aggressions that the Attorney General has launched an investigation.
But these speakers were the minority. Pryor's organization says they want education to be based on equal opportunity, meritocracy, tolerance, and achievement. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
You may remember the Virginia teacher who was put on leave after saying he would not refer to students by their preferred pronouns because it goes against his religion. Well, he sued the school board, and today a judge ruled in his favor. Here are the details.
After much support and prayer, elementary school teacher Tana Cross is heading back to the classroom, at least for now. He won an initial legal battle on Tuesday against Loudoun County Public Schools. Cross was put on leave after expressing his views at a public school board meeting. He spoke against a proposal that would require teachers to use students' preferred pronouns instead of their biological sex.
I love all of my students, but I will never lie to them regardless of the consequences. I'm a teacher, but I serve God first, and I will not affirm that a biological boy can be a girl and vice versa, because it's against my religion, it's lying to a child, it's abuse to a child, and it's sinning against our God.
The judge ruled in Cross's favor, saying evidence suggests the school district violated Cross's First Amendment rights to speech and religious liberty. Alliance Defending Freedom, the nonprofit advocacy group representing Cross, called the win a massive victory for freedom of speech. But a number of parents and teachers in Loudoun County aren't satisfied. At a school board meeting Tuesday night, they urged the board to respect First Amendment rights.
When I saw a teacher express an opinion and suspended for expressing his religious beliefs, I could no longer stay silent. When did it become acceptable to be tolerant only when someone expresses a view that we agree with? When did it become appropriate to silence those that hold Christian biblical views just because you don't?
You sent a message to parents and teachers that if we dare voice dissenting views, you will retaliate. That's what tyrants do, not public servants in a free country.
Now that he's been reinstated by a judge, we must ensure this never happens again. For the members of Chardonnay Antifa, here is your assignment with a copy of the First Amendment attached. I'm going to lead this here, and I hope you learned something.
The court order will only allow Cross to maintain his job until December 31st, unless other orders are put in place. But the judge suggested Cross is likely to succeed if his case is brought to trial. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
President Biden is removing restrictions on social networking apps TikTok and WeChat. At the same time, the Commerce Department will perform an evidence-based review of the Chinese-made software, with a focus on protecting Americans' personal health information.
The White House is withdrawing restrictions on some Chinese apps. The blocks were first proposed by the previous administration. Trump-era executive orders attempted to ban video sharing app TikTok and messaging platform WeChat, citing national security concerns. President Biden signed a new executive order on Wednesday, dropping the bans on new downloads of the apps. He's now ordering the Commerce Department to conduct an evidence-based review of apps supplied or controlled by China. On top of user data protection, the department will also give recommendations on how to protect Americans' personal health information and will address the risks of other apps connected with foreign adversaries. That's according to senior administration officials from the department. A court filing said the Commerce Department was looking into claims that TikTok poses national security threats and whether they're justifiable. An update will be released later this week. Former President Trump targeted TikTok last summer with several executive orders. Those documents accuse the app of collecting data on users. The attempted ban was blocked temporarily by court order. TikTok has since appealed to the U.S. Court of Appeals, hoping for a review of the Trump-era order and the U.S. Committee on Foreign Investment's investigation. The process is ongoing. TikTok is the most popular Chinese video sharing app. The social networking platform also boasts nearly 100 million monthly active users in the U.S. and nearly 700 million worldwide.
If you're in El Salvador, you can now use Bitcoin to purchase goods, making it the first country to do so. Many are reacting to this news, with some saying this is good news for the digital currency market, while others are more skeptical. NTD's Christina Kim brings us the different viewpoints.
El Salvador uses the U.S. dollar as its official currency, and now it's the first country to also accept Bitcoin as legal tender. People don't have to use Bitcoin if they don't want, but if it's offered as a form of payment, they must accept it. Additionally, prices can be expressed in Bitcoin, taxes can also be paid in Bitcoin, and exchanges in Bitcoin won't be subject to capital gains tax. But the U.S. dollar will remain the reference currency. Economic analyst Joseph Trevisani says the thing that impacts Bitcoin's value is how widely accepted it is. And there's no doubt that this move from El Salvador is helping the crypto market, at least for now. Shortly after the vote, the price of Bitcoin rose 5%.
This is a positive for them. This will be looked upon by all traders and all participants in the market as a future positive item.
Public perception is especially important because Bitcoin has no grounding in any of the economically traded markets. It's a purely electronic entity. That adds to its volatility. For example, when Colonial Pipeline ransom money was recovered, the value of Bitcoin fell. When Elon Musk expressed concerns over Bitcoin, it also fell. That's why Professor Steve Hanke, one of the world's leading experts on currencies, is skeptical about the move. He also says there could be more nefarious reasons that El Salvador moved to accept this hard-to-trace currency.
This idea of Bitcoin becoming legal tender is a very bizarre kind of move. If you already have a great currency, why Bitcoin? Because Bitcoin is not a currency. It's a highly speculative asset. Its price is very volatile.
As for the argument that Bitcoin could one day replace gold, Hanke says it's nonsense. But like it or not, Trevisani believes cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin will remain as an alternative.
Some people think the world is going to end, and so Bitcoin is a good thing to hold. Other people distrust governments as a matter of course, so Bitcoin is a good thing to have. Other people have criminal activities. It's harder to trace. Others just like the trading volatility. All of the reasons are valid reasons, meaning that they give people a reason to participate.
El Salvador's move may not have a large global impact. Both Hanke and Trevisani believe the strength of the U.S. dollar as the international currency will hold. As for the long-term impact of El Salvador's move, Hanke thinks it could be negative.
In a financial sense, I think it could be, ironically, bad news for Bitcoin because I think this will invite much more harsh and serious regulation of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies.
It might take a few years for Bitcoin's value to stabilize, if it does stabilize. And with more countries looking into digital currencies, we'll have to see how things play out. Christina Kim, NTD News.
A new study suggests that if you've recovered from the CCP virus, you're likely to be infection-free for months. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
Over 1,000 people who recovered from COVID were free from reinfection over the course of several months without vaccines. Cleveland Clinic scientists say their data suggests that people previously infected can go infection-free for at least 10 months. The only people who tested positive in their study were those never infected and never vaccinated. But the study hasn't been peer-reviewed. Republican Senator Rand Paul cited the study, calling it great news, and that its info frees up millions of doses of vaccines for those not yet infected in places with vaccine shortages like India. Now, since January, the National Institutes of Health has had data that suggests that people who recover from COVID have protection for up to 8 months. the CDC still recommends that everyone, regardless of infection history, get vaccinated. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Do you still have to wear a mask on public transport? The CDC and President Biden are facing a lawsuit over the mask mandate on public transportation. Washington, D.C. resident Lucas Wall filed a federal lawsuit over the mandate. He argues that such mandates are improper, illegal, and unconstitutional exercises of executive authority. He also argues that the mandate ignores medical data showing that face masks do not effectively reduce virus spread. Wall is fully vaccinated and flies frequently. He says he suffers from an anxiety disorder and breathing difficulties, and that he would feel like having a panic attack if he were to wear a mask. But TSA agents at Orlando Airport refused to board him on a flight last week for not wearing a mask. The CDC's current guideline says fully vaccinated people generally do not have to wear masks in most indoor areas. And former Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe is running again. He won big in the state's gubernatorial Democratic primary. Virginia bars governors from serving consecutive terms, and McAuliffe could become the first person to serve multiple terms in decades.
Terry McAuliffe on Tuesday easily won Virginia Democratic Party's nomination for governor with more than 60% of the vote. If McAuliffe wins the general election on November 2nd, this former governor would become Virginia's second two-term governor since the Civil War. The Commonwealth doesn't allow governors to serve consecutive terms. During the campaign, McAuliffe heavily promoted his achievements as former governor from 2014 to 2018, such as expanding voting rights for ex-felons and a drop in unemployment. McAuliffe is a longtime Democratic fundraiser with close ties to the Clintons. In 2016, the FBI reportedly began a probe into McAuliffe's previous campaign over possible illegal contributions, especially $120,000 from a Chinese businessman who was backed by the Chinese Communist Party. Though McAuliffe's attorney reportedly said the probe was focused on whether McAuliffe lobbied the U.S. government on behalf of foreign entities. The new nominee will face off against the Republican pick, Glenn Youngkin. The 54-year-old political newcomer was a former private equity executive. Lin Lin, NTD News.
Coming up, a leaked video shows a bus driver losing control of a passenger bus before crashing into a building. The bus won't be moved until workers can stabilize the building. And in California, officials announced the largest drug bust in its history, where a large illegal marijuana operation was growing. That and more on NTD News. A disturbing video was released of an MTA passenger bus that crashed into a three-story building in Brooklyn. 13 people were injured, including the driver. NTD's Jason Perry has a story.
As the bus driver gets out of his seat to change the bus number, he sets a shopping bag on the dashboard. Another bag can be seen on the floorboard underneath the driver's seat. When the driver sat back down, something happens that causes the bus to accelerate uncontrollably, smashing into the vehicle in front of the bus. The driver then swerved through an intersection and plowed through the front end of a pickup truck before smashing into this three-story building. The cause of the bus accelerating out of control is still unknown. The MTA bus company president told NBC New York that there is no evidence of any mechanical issue. But the vice president of New York's public transport union felt otherwise.
We have to look at all things. Is it mechanical? Is it design? Was there other interference? We have to figure it out. We're talking about a veteran who's driven hundreds of thousands of miles without incident. What happened here?
Due to structural damage, the city's Department of Buildings rendered the entire building unsafe to occupy, and residents of the building were ordered to vacate. But the bus will stay in place until the building crews can repair and stabilize the building.
We're upset that the video was leaked by the Transit Authority because people then jump to conclusions, and that's just not fair.
He isn't happy that the MTA released the video during an open investigation, but he said the main part in the video to look for is when the driver sat down. That's the part that's going to be under investigation. Jason Perry, NTD News, New York.
Another Texas city is banning abortion. Leveland in northern Texas is the latest city to declare itself a sanctuary for the unborn. All 4 city council members voted in favor of the ban. Their ordinance bans procuring or performing any kind of abortions at any stage of pregnancy in the small city. It is also illegal for anyone to knowingly aid or abet an abortion. A council member says they have done something that has been long overdue. Levelland has a population of a little over 10,000. The nearby city Lubbock also approved similar measures in early May. Planned Parenthood sued Lubbock over it, but a U.S. District Court judge dismissed it, saying Planned Parenthood lacks jurisdiction. And in Southern California, officials announced the largest drug bust in its history. The suspects had a large illegal marijuana growing operation. Here's NTD's Eileen Ang with more.
On Tuesday, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department announced they cracked down on the largest drug operation in the department's history. They raided greenhouses in Lancaster, California, filled with millions of dollars worth of marijuana. The operation was discovered after authorities received multiple complaints over several months from local residents.
We were getting complaints about how these illegal marijuana grows was impacting life here. People were being threatened. Water was being stolen from farmers, to the point where there's farms that are going out of business because they no longer afford the water. That's how much the marijuana operation is impacting the high desert.
So far, they made 23 arrests, seized 5 firearms, and recovered 2 water trucks. 5 men identified as Mexican nationals were detained at the scene. They arrived in the U.S. within the last month.
We have alfalfa farmers, potato and carrot farmers, and seeing them go out of business to support illegal marijuana, and which enriches the cartels, is something we're not going to tolerate at all.
According to a spokesperson for the United States Drug Enforcement Administration, growing illegal marijuana leaves toxins, harming the natural environment. It also diverts water away from farmers. Last year, LA County found 150 illegal marijuana growers, but this year, the number increased to over 500. The number of greenhouses involved also grew from an average of 8 to 15. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
Coming up, concerns keep growing about China stealing American technology and intellectual property. Now, a U.S. university's professor is facing trial for concealing his ties with China while receiving U.S. government research funds. And is the U.S. too dependent on China for critical supplies? The Pentagon's new report highlights one supply chain that China currently dominates. That and more on NTD News.
We're becoming more and more urban. We lose our connection with nature. This little girl lives in a world of natural beauty, nature all around her. Not everybody has this opportunity. Things are growing all around her. All sort of handmade things. The artist has portrayed a scene that is so comforting and so grounded that we can experience this ourselves. The artist himself has to be absolutely natural. And it's not easy to do because children are hard to paint. Birds are hard to paint. They don't sit still. This is quite an accomplishment, reflecting nature back to us. It's just a pure, natural painting.
Kids will be kids, which just goes to say kids will be curious. They get into everything, everything. If there's a loaded firearm in the house, they could get their hands on that too. Keeping firearms locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition in a place inaccessible to kids can help keep your loved ones safe from family fire. Safe gun storage saves lives.
A scientist from the University of Tennessee faces charges for hiding research work in China while receiving U.S. government grants for his work in Tennessee. The case was brought to court on Monday, and he's the first to be put on trial among many researchers arrested over similar accusations.
An Ming Hu is a former assistant professor at University of Tennessee. He is facing felony charges including wire fraud and making false statements related to his work in China. The case stems from Hu's dual professorship with UT and the Beijing University of Technology in China. The prosecutor alleges that he hid his China collaborations from the U.S. government while receiving grants from NASA for his research at UT. Hu was born in China and is a naturalized citizen of Canada. He is the first professor at an American university to be criminally charged as a result of a 2011 law that keeps federal agencies from unwittingly funding the CCP's ambitions in scientific research. Hu denies the charges. The U.S. Senate passed a $250 billion bill on Tuesday trying to boost competition with China in technology research. It also puts more restrictions on recipients of U.S. government research funds from accepting money from governments like China or Russia.
The Pentagon's new report says that the U.S. is excessively dependent on Chinese imports, especially rare earth minerals. They suggest diversifying supply chains. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more.
A new government report is out, in line with Biden's 100-day supply chain review order. It includes findings from the Defense Department, among other agencies. The review assesses risk to America's access to critical products, like those used in pharmaceuticals and semiconductors. It finds the U.S. excessively dependent on imports from China, especially rare earth minerals used in electronics and the aerospace industry. Rare earth minerals are also used in enhancing metal properties, something critical for manufacturing and agriculture. China currently dominates the world's rare earth supply chain. This directly affects the flow of key materials around the world. As a result, many rare earth producers in the U.S. are shutting down because they can no longer compete with China. Some of them even moved their business there. The report also warns of China's unfair trade practices, like restricting exports to gain trade leverage over the U.S. Beijing's aggressive tactics could potentially expose the U.S. to supply chain vulnerabilities, a hidden hazard to national and economic security. The report points out that China has shown a willingness to restrict access to resources, with reductions in its exports of rare earth elements over the past 10 years. In addition, the report finds that China took over large portions of supply chains and several critical materials using state-led non-market interventions. And even if the U.S. was to diversify its import sources, it would still be reliant on China for processing before use in end product manufacturing. The report advises the U.S. to work with allies and partners to diversify supply chains away from China. On Tuesday, the White House also called on Congress to authorize at least $50 billion in investment funding for domestic manufacturing and research on key materials.
A building in South Korea was being demolished today when it suddenly collapsed, falling onto a busy street. At least 9 people were killed.
A 5-story building that was in the midst of a demolition process suddenly collapsed and fell onto a busy street in South Korea on Wednesday. Officials say at least 9 people were killed and 8 seriously injured in the tragedy. The accident occurred in Gwangju, 170 miles southwest of the capital Seoul. Officials at the Gwangju Fire and Safety Headquarters said the reason for the collapse was unclear. The fire station had received the report of the collapse, which buried a bus that was near the demolition site. South Korea has been known in the past for having a bad safety record in terms of infrastructure. A department store collapse killed more than 500 people in 1995, and a bridge collapse in 1994 killed 49 people. But the country has in recent years tried to improve its safety record.
Coming up, the people of Switzerland will decide whether to ban synthetic pesticides this Sunday. Voters remain divided over the issue. And find out more about the 3 sisters in Cornwall, UK, who helped prepare local gifts for the G7 leaders. That and more on NTD News.
Hi folks, Joe Namath here, and if you're on Medicare, this is important. You're now entitled to eliminate co-pays and get dental care, dentures, eyeglasses, prescription coverage, in-home aids, unlimited transportation, and home-delivered meals, all at no additional cost. Plus, your zip code may have coverage with the Give Back benefit that adds money back to your Social Security check every month.
I called to get dental, transportation, meals, and the Give Back benefit.
With this virus situation, I called to get everything I'm entitled to. I couldn't believe I was missing out on so many benefits.
With the uncertainty of the virus, you need to get everything you're entitled to. Millions of people have trusted the Medicare Coverage Helpline. You can too. Call now. It's free.
Call 1-800-764-1930. That's 1-800-764-1930 now.
The people of Switzerland are looking at a European first this weekend when they decide whether to ban synthetic pesticides. Swiss voters are starkly divided over this issue.
Switzerland could become the first European country to ban synthetic pesticides in a referendum this Sunday. Supporters of the ban say pesticides can cause serious health problems and reduce biodiversity. Manufacturers say their products are rigorously tested and regulated and can be used safely. This organic farmer wants Switzerland to be a pioneer.
That would be unbelievably great for people's quality of life. Our drinking water will sometime in the future, 20 or 30 years, be pure again. Our soil will be fertile again, and we would have less dependence on foreign countries.
Another initiative to be voted on the same day aims to improve the quality of Switzerland's drinking water by stopping direct subsidies to farmers who use synthetic pesticides and antibiotics in livestock. If adopted, both proposals give farmers up to 10 years to make the transition. This dairy farmer says the consequences for farms and the rural economy would be brutal.
Our production would go rapidly down. We won't have any Swiss chicken meat, we won't have any Swiss pig meat, and the result would be there would be much more import.
Switzerland has been starkly divided by an unusually bitter debate over the initiatives. Some shoppers are in favor.
I'm going to vote yes, because I think we need to think of the future. We cannot continue to use pesticides for farming. It damages people's health, it damages the soils.
Many Swiss farmers say they feel their way of life is under siege.
Now you find a lot of people, especially in the cities, they have not even a clue what farming means. So if they have 2 tomatoes in their garden in front of the window, they think they understand farming and they know how to do organic farming.
Recent polls show votes look set to be close.
To prepare gifts for the leaders of the world's richest countries is certainly a challenge, but the government has solved the problem with the help of 3 sisters.
When world leaders arrive in Cornwall this week, they'll find in their rooms a hamper of Cornish-made delicacies and gifts. They're all designed by sisters Ainsley Fowler, Tegan Mackay and Safi Maki. The trio's lifestyle shop in St Ives was chosen by the government to provide gifts for the delegates, and the commission came out of the blue.
And they actually said, I'm calling from the Cabinet Office and one of your products has really caught the attention of number 10, which I of course thought, is this a joke? Is this real?
The sisters' shop was set up in February 2020, just before the first lockdown. They said the commission has provided a real boost for their business after a difficult year.
And we were of course super excited. But they were basically really excited about one product, but it kind of snowballed into other products and eventually led into us doing the hampers for the leaders.
The sisters are keeping secret the exact contents of the hampers, but the items include local biscuits, chocolates, pictures, frames, candles and bath salts. They're also providing soaps and shower gels for the rooms. World leaders looking to relax after long days of meetings will be enjoying lime and bergamot shower gel and rosehip oil body balm.
A new concrete pathway on Greece's ancient monument, the Acropolis, allows wheelchair access, but it's drawing criticism from politicians and academics who say the pathway ruins the classical aesthetics of the site. Maha Al-Badrawi has the story.
The Acropolis in Athens has a new concrete pathway to facilitate wheelchair access, and some people are not happy about it. The UNESCO World Heritage Site attracts thousands of visitors a day in peak periods, most of whom climb the 160-metre hill on foot and wander on uneven stone paths worn smooth over hundreds of years. The new concrete track is laid over a synthetic membrane that protects the ancient stones underneath and permits easy removal, but critics say it ruins the classical harmony of the ancient site. Opposition leader Alexis Tsipras last month demanded the Conservative government, quote, stop abusing our cultural heritage. Culture Minister Lina Mendoni defended the development.
I've seen people in wheelchairs who came up here for the first time and felt happy. I think this is something that should also make us particularly happy, because to give joy to people is perhaps just as significant as the protection of our cultural goods.
Other changes made to improve accessibility include a new elevator and golf carts, and there are plans for tactile mobile models to allow blind people a fuller experience of the monuments. Visitors like Michael Kirk had positive feelings about the developments.
I still think the Acropolis is very beautiful and it is amazing. I think it's cool that now everyone can see it. I don't think it's changed. I don't think it's hurt the Acropolis at all.
And one cute dog in a village in the Arctic almost died after it walked off a bit too far from home. Luckily, some good Samaritans came to his rescue. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the story.
A fluffy dog was rescued in the Arctic by Russian sailors. It had wandered off the home village and got lost in the sea ice. A Russian icebreaker was working near the gates of the Arctic terminal when his crew noticed a pet by the board. The animal could have gotten hurt by moving ships, so sailors decided to rescue it.
We investigated all the possibilities of lifting the animal from the ice and placed a ceremonial ladder which the dog used to get on board.
The ship owner said that the dog had no chance of returning to the shore and could have even died since the ice had already begun to drift and there were many cracks on its surface. So the crew used mobile communications to contact locals, found the dog owner, and a few hours later the animal was safely returned to the village. Later it turned out that the dog owner was looking for one-year-old Aika for more than a week.
When they showed me the video, I did not recognize her at first. She looked so unhappy, all covered with ice, and she did not walk well.
She said the dog pricked its paws in the sharp ice, which is why it couldn't walk properly. Fortunately, Aika's injuries have mostly healed by now. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
5 Arctic wolf pups were filmed frolicking in a wildlife park in Belgium recently after their mother gave birth to them in April.
The caves of Han Wildlife Park in Belgium is host to a male and female pair of wolves, Gary and Kisa. The female alpha, Kisa, went into the den alone on April 17th, and when the keepers visited a few days later, they spotted 5 small pups, 3 females and 2 males. This video shows them playing together while enjoying the sun, under the watchful gaze of their parents. According to keepers, the cubs and the mother are healthy and doing well.
Another herd of elephants was spotted in southwest China. This group of 10 Asian elephants is separate from the 15 that attracted attention for traveling over 300 miles in the last year. This herd was seen in a bamboo forest in Yunnan province, the hub of Asian elephant communities. It's unclear why the elephant herds are on the move. Local media said there is less food available in the elephant's habitat, and the habitat itself is shrinking as banana, tea, or rubber plantations replace tropical forest. In addition, some forest area is used to grow ingredients for traditional Chinese medicine. The elephant population in Yunnan has grown in recent decades, but the Asian elephant species is still considered endangered. And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox. We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.